So I've decided that tonight I would like some pasta, and I've got lots of different things laying around in my pantry while being here in quarantine. Like, for example, I have basil pasta sauce in this lovely can here. I've got some frozen sausages. And of course, I've got pasta laying around, but if you've never made fresh pasta and you have eggs and flour laying around, then that is going to be the tasty, better option. So I've decided I'm going to make my own pasta today. So I'm going to set aside the other simple ingredients that I'll use for my pasta sauce, and we're going to make the pasta together. So the recipe that I'm using today actually uses something called 00 flour, 00 flour, which is the flour that I used in a previous recipe to make pizza dough. It is a special flour that has been ground specifically to use for things like pizza crust and for pasta. So I'm using this. If you want your best pasta, then using this kind of flour is the right idea, but if not, then an all-purpose white flour will technically get you there. So what I have is I have 400 grams of my flour, and I have 5 eggs. A very quick and important note, I actually had to remake this pasta dough, which you're not going to see in the video, but I used too much egg. For my 400 grams of flour, I really only needed 4 medium eggs, so just FYI. We're going to begin by pouring our flour out onto the counter, and we want it to be in a nice tall mountain. There we are. A little bit extra. There we go. And then we're going to make a well in the center of our flour. We want all the eggs to fit into the middle of the well. And we're going to mix all of this by hand. I'm going to pour my eggs into the well. And then I'm just going to start mixing with my hands. I'm going to make a really big mess, so this should be super duper fun. And see, I've already managed to get my eggs going onto the counter, but that's okay because the idea here is that we're mixing. I am obviously not the best at this, but that's okay because you don't have to be. You're just making your dough to come together. So we're going to add flour and get everything nice and wet. Make sure that your yolks get broken, because those floating around in there certainly aren't going to help. And don't forget, like what I'm doing on accident is I'm forgetting that I have dry flour at the part of the flour that's closest to me, which is very silly. So I just have to remember where all of my dry flour is and just keep mixing. Alright, there we have our finished pasta dough. Now we need to let it rest for about 30 minutes. The best way to do that is to cover it in clear foil, or in this case, I'm just going to place it quickly in a clear plastic bag, and we're just going to let it sit at room temperature for about 30 minutes, and then it'll be time to do some pasta rolling. So our dough has been resting for half an hour in the refrigerator, and now it's time to roll and cut our pasta. I'm not gonna lie to you folks, this is some hard work, but it absolutely pays off. What we're gonna do is we're gonna lightly flour our work surface. Lightly flour. And I have the best of all of my rolling pins to do this because this is gonna take some work, some effort. So the first thing we're gonna do, this is a lot of pasta dough to work with, so we're actually going to cut this into quarters, into 4 whole pieces, and then we're only going to use 1 piece at a time. I'm going to set aside 3 of my pieces and just kind of cover them up a little bit. Now, the trick with pasta dough is to roll it as thin as you possibly can. The shape is not such a big deal, although we want to try and get it like long and sort of like short, but we can always trim off edges and things. And the way that I like to do this, just to make sure that it's not sticking to the counter or to my rolling pan, pin, excuse me, is I flour and rub, and then I can start the rolling process. I'm just going to scoot over my flour because I can already tell I'm definitely going to need more space. I also turn my dough a lot. Just like that. It's especially important to make sure that you've got flour on the side of the dough that's on the counter. It's not as likely to stick to the rolling pin as it is to the counter. Turning it also helps me to control the shape a little bit. You'll notice I do a lot of rolling up and down rather than side to side. It's just an easier way for me to put my whole body weight into rolling it, and you've really got to. But little by little, you can see that our dough is growing. Now I can tell that I'm nearing the end, and the reason I can tell is because I'm starting to see the pattern of my counter, my ugly blue counter, through the dough, which means it's really thin, which is exactly what we want. So this is looking really, really good. I can see my countertop through the dough, which means it's very thin. You always have to be a little bit careful of the edges. My rolling pin, for example, has a tendency to roll out the middle more than the edges. So that's all I'm doing, is I'm just cleaning up the edges. Now look at that. That is a great sheet of pasta. Now all that's left to do is to cut the pasta into the shape that we'd like. I was using a knife before to cut my pasta, and then Dani got the brilliant idea that maybe I should use another Italian kitchen tool, the pizza cutter, and guess what? It actually works so much easier. So I'm going to recommend, guys, that you use a pizza cutter to cut your pasta, because it's just so much faster. And here we go, our absolutely fantastic stack of fresh pasta. I can cook this in some boiling water with a little bit of salt in it for just a couple of minutes. Fresh pasta does not take long to cook at all. And mix this with my favorite pasta sauces, and it shall be delicious. So, enjoy.